Yeah, but who's speak first?
Yo, yo! Good afternoon, everyone. And you're here for what is the Letterific second annual QCon debate, which this year is subs versus dubs. I am your master of ceremonies for the afternoon, Hugh Govan, cosplaying as a man who regrets all of his decisions. Now, on this side here, we've got our dubs, half of them pending, and our subs over here, so they are.
Look, just because dubs are always later.
Anyway, we're not going to go through our usual parliamentary pomp of our regular meetings and get straight through to the speeches that everyone's here for. We're going to have 4 speeches, 7 minutes each, alternating between each side. Afterwards, we're going to open to questions to both sides from all of you lovely people out on the floor here. So, without any further ado, we shall please begin. And which one of you is going first?
Yeah, see, that was why I asked who's prom.
Going first for the sub side is Miss Kira Swale.
Right, so first of all, why you would watch subs instead of dubs is just the plain aspect of not all animes are dubbed. It will get to that point where you'll be looking at a good anime that you think is good, but inevitably you will have to watch a sub because the dub just practically isn't available. Also, it is far easier to find a good sub. Like, with a sub, you always know it's going to be at least decent. Whereas with a dub, you actually have to do a bit of research in if it's bad or good. Like, you maybe have to look at the voice cast, you have to look at the setting, and you actually have to evaluate whether you are going to watch the sub if it's going to be good or not. Whereas with subs, you just don't really get that. And also, we're going to move on to the practical aspects of why dubbing is going to lessen your experience of enjoying the anime. Because here's the thing, with Japanese, you can have a short phrase that actually needs a bit of a longer sentence to actually explain in English. But if you have dub, you're not going to get all that through the pure aspect of the fact that you have to get an English phrase that fits in the time slot allotted. So inevitably you are going to lose some meaning. Whereas with a sub, all you have to do is write a longer sentence for that shorter anime phrase.
On that point, surely that results in stilted, unnatural dialogue, which is completely dissimilar to what any human would actually say.
No, because it's Japanese voice actors, and all you have to do is read below it. And anyway, if you just miss a sub, all you have to do is just go back and read it again, or pause it slightly. Whereas with a dub, you have nothing to compare it to. So for example, if you're watching a dub, you're going to automatically take that as right. That's what the actual original would mean. But it might not. They may, because personally, I've had to do translation before. It's awkward, and sometimes things don't translate well. So basically, and now I'm going to move on to the actual aspects of anime, which is why I got into it in the first place, was to actually learn more about the Japanese language. Because personally, I know if you're an avid anime watcher, you'll hear various phrases such as baka, senpai, sugoi, and other lovely phrases such as that. But personally, I wanted to watch it to actually learn more about the Japanese language. And for example, I learned more about the honorific system, the kun, san, things like that. And it's actually inspired me to want to learn Japanese. Like, I'm actually starting to learn Japanese at this moment. I'm going to take a Japanese course in September, and that's great. And you're not going to get that with a dub. You're just going to watch the English and go, right, grand, I'm watching English. But with the anime, you could actually be inspired to learn a different language, and that has numerous aspects. Whereas if you want to meet new people, if you want to just learn more about culture in general, because you're going to learn so much about culture by learning a bit of its language. Because there are constant times where I've watched an anime and a joke just hasn't worked in English, and that's an aspect of translation just simply can't be avoided.
On that point, yes, you can. In a good dub, they will translate things less literally. For example, replacing a joke only makes sense to a Japanese audience, a joke makes sense to an English audience, such as in the dub of Rapunzel.
Yes, but you are inevitably going to get some distortion, and some jokes just can't work in English because you have certain phonetics. So you can change that to English, but sometimes it just is impossible. Whereas with a sub, if something just doesn't work, you can actually look it up and understand why a joke works or doesn't work, and actually learn more about the culture in general. And that's why you should watch subs instead of dubs. And also, there are some people that would say dubs are getting better. You know, they're not as bad as they used to be. Well, what about the older anime? If you want to watch the classics like Akira and everything like that.
Point, and Cowboy Bebop, one of the greatest things of all time.
Yes, but I would like to say that's an exception to the rule. Because let's be honest, there are far many bad dubs of older anime than there are good ones, unfortunately. So basically, if you want to watch one of the classics and you watch a dub, you will be sorely disappointed because A, you'll be really distracted by the mouth that just won't move in tandem with the words they're saying. B, usually it's bad voice acting, and C, sometimes it just quite simply takes away from the emotion because the voice actors aren't really as good as the Japanese voice actors. So if you want to watch the classic anime, great anime out there, subs is really the only option unless you want to laugh at it. But personally, I love anime. I love the culture, I love anime, I've watched so much anime over the years. So personally, I think it's really, I'd like to say, anyone who watches dubs, fair play, it's what you want to do. But personally, I love subs because I learn more about the culture. I love just the sound of Japanese voice acting. That there's such an intensity to it that personally, it's very hard to find in a dub. And just in the basic aspect of its subs, you'll get a sub with any anime, whether it's a fan sub, it's a professionally done sub. Whereas there's many famous anime out there that just simply doesn't have a dub. Like for example, School Days only has a French dub. That me, I study French. That'd be useful to me, but not the majority of people in this room. So it's more available. There's more availability. It's just better to understand the language. So go for subs versus dubs. Thank you very much.
Alright. And thanks to Kira for her brilliant speech. And there's a wee detail that I accidentally glossed over in the intro. You may have heard I rang the bell there after the first minute. It means that after that protected time of the first minute of the speech is over, after that's done, any one of you sitting out there on the floor can also offer your questions. And I'll close time again on the 6th minute when I rang the bell again. So if you have any queries, issues or difficulties during the speech, during that time you can raise them. And now,
point of order.
aye.
You should also point out that the speaker has the right to refuse them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, of course. And if they don't want to take your question, they don't have to, so don't force them out. Please, it makes my job a lot more difficult. So, up next, and our first speaker for the dubs side, Matthew Sullivan.
Alright. So, I think that when we think of the idea of a bad dub, let's face it, we think of dubs, we do often think of the really bad things, such as, Kaiba, you're coming with me. And I know I'll use my frying pan as a drying pan. And I'll take a potato chip and eat it. Fortunately for us, the era of the bad dog is fast going away. For example, about 7 years ago, 4Kids, curses on their name, went out of business. So we no longer have to deal with things like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Or rather, we still need to deal with them, because they're already dubbed. But we don't need to deal with other things being dubbed terribly. Which means we now live in a golden era of good dubs. For example, basically any anime you watch on, say, Netflix is going to have a great dub. For example, One Punch Man, which I watched last week, the entirety of it is different. It's a great dub. In fact, I think it's a lot better than the subbed version, because it relies a lot on its very nice visuals, which you will be distracted from by having to read subtitles along the bottom.
On that point, sir.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Anyone who can read a greater than perhaps a first year level is able to look at two things at once. You are able to read and observe what's going on the screen.
But you're distracted from what else is on the screen. By nature of splitting your attention, you're giving less attention to the things that are not some words on the screen. Now, on point of rebuttal, we talk a lot about the availability of dubs. Essentially this idea that if you're watching dub, or rather if you prefer to watch dubs, you have less options available to you because less things are dubbed. I would like to point out that my second favourite anime of all time is only available in dubs. Sword Art Online, the abridged series. As well as basically every other abridged series. Man, I really should have prepared for this speech, or rather brought the notes I did prepare, but I didn't print them. Yes, I should have. Most of them won't.
On that point?
No. So, there's also this idea that well, you can get this more direct translation. It's better because, you know, a Japanese person might say something that's in our language 2 syllables, where in English it actually means something like the flowing water in the road which flooded Queen's University. Well, that's the thing. If you're a competent translator, not like 4Kids, if you're sort of a translator who might be working on a modern day dub, because they put effort into them nowadays, you might translate such a joke as, oh, he's crossing the road and he's a chicken. That's probably a joke. And you translate that into something that works in English, because if you're dubbing something, you have the liberty to make small changes to make it suit the intended audience. For example, there's a relatively, I was going to say well-known, it's not well-known, but it's decently known example of the French dub of Rapunzel, where the scene Rapunzel, essentially, Rapunzel's got Flynn Rider tied up, and she's like, alright, now you're going to tell me everything I want to know. And he's like, alright, I don't remember. Oh yeah. He's like, alright, sweetheart, or something like that. And he's like, Rapunzel. And he's like, alright. Oh yeah, no. See, I fucked that up completely. I'll do that again. Sorry. This isn't a real meeting.
I'm not finding him.
So, yeah, no, Flynn says, alright, Blondie. And she says, answer. And he says, okay. This doesn't... Fuck, I fucked it up again. That's the joke. That's why it doesn't work in French. Because in English we have this idea, if you say something in a different language, you don't understand it, you can then reply with Gesundheit, and I can see like they said something that was just gibberish. That just doesn't work in French, because French doesn't have this idea of saying a German word to mean, oh, that was nonsense. So, in the sub, you get the same joke, except it just doesn't make sense. Whereas in the dub, we have the brilliant exchange of, alright, Blondie, which she replies, réponse, which is the French word for Rapunzel, which also means answer, to which he responds, I am answer!
That point, sir.
Yeah, sure.
I get it.
I get it, for one.
It wouldn't work in a sub.
But surely, in a circumstance, this is compromising the inherent justification of music.
No. In fact, it makes it better, because The point of artistry, ladies and gentlemen, is to convey emotion and feeling to your audience. And you can only do that, when you have links to your audience. When you can use these devices, which only you and your audience will understand, it is much, much easier to convey these feelings and emotions. Whereas, if you're stopped by this language barrier, it's much more difficult, and inherently, you end up with a loss of meaning. You might say, oh, it's a less direct translation, so you lose meaning, when in fact, you're losing meaning because you will almost... Yes?
What about the loss of emotional meaning? So the English voice actors, generally unprofessional voice actors,
That is a good
actual
point.
actors using their face and voice tandem. However, the Japanese voice actors are professional. They're trained to use their voice and portray already.
That's a good point, but that's because obviously I think it's the case that people in different parts of the world do express emotion differently, and it is harder to relate to a Japanese voice actor because I do not.
On that
It's
point.
not racist, I promise. Because I do not have experience in their culture. I don't have these 20 years of living around Japanese people, so I can get all of the small idioms that they can take for granted. All of the small changes in tone. While a Japanese person might instantly get, because they've lived in that culture 20 years, 220 years old. I won't. Because I necessarily, because I live in a completely different part of the world, will get that. Whereas in a dub, I can get those because if they're English-speaking voice actors, they can convey these emotions to an English-speaking audience much more easily. Is that 7 minutes?
Yes.
Then I'll wrap up. To conclude, aside from my ridiculous tangent about Rapunzel, I think it's very clear that dubs are the better medium. If you can get a good dub, obviously. If you're getting a bad dub, then yeah, sure, the sub's better. That's like saying, oh, which is better, a sandwich or a hot dog? Except the hot dogs, instead of being a sausage, is made of unknown pickle. That's you. That's what your arguments sound like. To conclude, I conclude.
I'd like to thank Matthew Sullivan for his speech and for very interesting trivia about the French dub of Tangled. You definitely pull out in the pub to sound intelligent.
Analysis perfect.
And now speaking second for our sub side is Russell Nairn.
Sup, weebs? What is anime? Seriously. What is it? Because I'm coming at this argument from the perspective of an English student. An English student who also happens to do politics. So there are two things I care about a lot here. It's artistic integrity and it is economics. And as anyone in this debating society will confirm, I've somehow managed to squeeze an economic argument in every speech, and I have done so here as well. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about, and it was touched on briefly, is the fact that when you are dubbing over a piece that was originally written in a different language, you are inevitably going to compromise the artistic integrity of that piece. A piece is written with a particular artistic vision in mind and a particular artistic vision portrayed to the audience. Things such as the inflection of the voice actors, the way in which they say things, even if it is in a language you don't understand, still contributes wholly to the feeling that the piece puts across.
That point.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly my point, because somebody who speaks English all the time can put these inflections in their English speaking in a way that English speaking people will understand. I'm not going to do that same thing.
Because Mr. Sullivan, you have walked right into my trap. You have triggered my trap card, as they say.
Oh no.
Indeed. You make this point of the fact that we should just dub things because then it is easier for someone who speaks English to understand it. It's easier in every context. The problem is that that is an unhealthy attitude to take. Instead of retreating to the safety of our familiar language, instead of retreating to the safety of our familiar cultural experience, we should instead be aiming to learn from different cultures' interpretations of issues. If a joke in a Japanese cartoon, I believe they're called, is in this manner not quite coherent to a Western audience, that doesn't mean we should change what was written originally. That's absurd. That's compromising the piece as a whole. It instead means that the duty falls upon us as an audience to interpret the work and to actually do some research and to perhaps, I dare say, learn something in the process and gather a greater cultural appreciation on whole.
On that point,
We cannot just keep like the average audience member, despite what your typical Western studio may believe, is not an idiot. They are willing to do work on their own. They are willing to find things out. I think the fact, just looking at the enthusiasm shown at this convention all around, people very clearly care about these things and are very clearly willing to put the extra legwork in to find out and to gain greater appreciation for it. So that's my first point on the whole. And it brings me on to my second major issue. Is that I'm going to talk about artistic appreciation. How can we maximize the appreciation for this different medium? And if the subtitles on a whole are far easier to do to a high standard than a dub would be, this is where my economic argument falls in. You see, you would suggest that it is beneficial for the most of this work to be available for people to consume. And the simple reality is your average small studio is going to have a much easier time releasing a subtitled version to a Western audience than they would releasing an entirely dubbed version. Because the dubbed version will be of lower quality if they do not have the funding to do so, and will be compromised irreparably.
on that point, time and time again we're shown, even with god-awful dubs, the fact that they're dubbed makes them immediately much more palatable and successful in the Western audience. Take, for example, Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, which are successful in the West because they were dubbed. If you were a kid, you wouldn't want to read.
The kids should read them, Mr. Sullivan, and we're going to do that very soon. But regardless of that, just because these mainstream things have substance gain popularity for their dub, does not mean that niche content coming from studios with a lot less money, with a lot less capacity to afford this sort of production, that doesn't mean we should completely ignore that on whole. Therefore, we should be allowing a circumstance where subtitles are the preferred medium for releasing these places, because subtitles not only are cheaper to produce, oftentimes they end up being free. I mean, the entire reason the anime scene really even gained popularity in the West to begin with was fans of them translating them and subtitling them so that people could, actually experience this medium. And, that wasn't luxury day for Yu-Gi-Oh! Mr. Sullivan. These were people who had to put in the serious legwork, which further reinforces my point of people really caring about these things and wanting to understand them. So, why then are subtitles objectively better than dubs? I'm not speaking in a terminology here of subjective. I'm not talking about, it's your personal preference here. Why do you gain a better understanding of the piece as a result of subtitles coming from the perspective of an English literature student who spends far too much of his time reading books? Because the children should read, Mr. Sullivan. We have seen time and time again within studies that reading a piece will lead to better retention of its contents than listening to it. This is the case because reading is an active form of participation in the medium, whereas listening is a passive. You retain more of a book's information than you would of a television show's. You retain more of, a classic example I always use of this because I am a unapologetic nerd. Is the case how you always remember more details of those, CRPGs on computers and all the text all over the place, because you have to meticulously read it and actively engage with it, as opposed to something like Skyrim, where everything's a bit forgettable because it's just being thrown at you. So, in that circumstance, you have to pay less attention to participating dub, which leads things to being worse. Your average audience member is once again not stupid, and the dub side seems to believe that your average audience member is stupid and requires to have things spelled out for them, but not quite spelled out for them because there's no spelling involved. And it is entirely pointless. And Sullivan, again, took my bait on this on a few occasions, and allowed me to point out that because he suggested that a dub is inherently better because you don't have to read for it. That makes it worse. That means you are going to come back with a worse understanding of the piece. It means you are going to get less from it. You're going to be consuming it not as a piece of art, but as a piece of passive entertainment, which I feel detracts from any medium. I think I should be giving all art the respect it deserves by actually engaging and trying to understand it. So that's my anime speech. Thank you for listening, and subs.
Alright, thank you very much, Russell. And now for the final speech and the second speech for the dub side, Calvin Black.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members of the opposition. Thank you to my esteemed predecessor, Mr. Sutherland. And hello to the audience this afternoon. Just a quick word of warning. If at any point during this debate I collapse to the ground in some kind of fugue set, please just call Liz Best. He'll be able to wheel me away back to the registration cage in which I belong. So, there have been a number of interesting points raised. I apologise for missing the beginning of your speech, Mrs. Swale. I'm sure there are many points made then. I'd like to rebut a few very quickly before getting on to the three main notes that I have here before me. So, just a question that I'd like to pose is that is it better for a series to have no dub at all?
Sean Myrtle to reception. That's Sean Myrtle to reception. Thank you.
Is it better for a series to have no dub at all and have no appreciation or little appreciation in the West? Or is it better for it to have a mediocre dub and reach a much wider audience? Because that is the point that Mr. Sullivan was making. Yes, subs may be better in some respects. Subs may be more accurate in some respects, and they may be more beloved in some respects. But they do reach a much narrower audience. Regardless of what you think of the quality, dubs do get watched by much more or many more people. And surely, if we are fans and whatnot, what we should really be wanting is for the most number of people possible to experience the medium that we love. And so, thank you. And so I would say personally that any dub, well, okay, not any dub, but at the very least a mediocre dub is better than no dub.
Sir.
No thanks, I will that's just a point from you in a bit. Another point made by Mr. Nair was about how reading is much more beneficial to the young children and all that has much more. Yes, that is true, and yes, we should want children to read, but what? As I'm sure any parent will tell you, getting your children to do anything is not easy, hard, in fact. And also, another question I pose is, do we really need to spend every waking moment learning? Yes, it is important to learn, it's important to learn often, but we need to rest, we need to relax, and that is often what we use anime and other forms for. And as such, if we don't take time for something like this, we are headed towards a burnout of glorious proportions. Well, okay, so on my 3 main points anyway, I'll start taking points from that. A point that people often make is the poor quality of dubs. This has been addressed, so I won't touch on it very long. As Sullivan has said, and as I kind of alluded to before whenever I put in information, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as any sane and rational and reasonable person should be concerned, the age of poor dubs is over. Mediocre dubs still exist. I don't deny that at all. There are a number of series that I love, such as No Game Enough or Blue Exorcist, which I would say, and also One Punch Man, I personally would say has a fairly mediocre dub. But that's not bad. By definition, it's not bad. It's just fine. It doesn't really inspire much. But excellent dubs do exist. One that just immediately springs to mind is Hero Academia, and if anybody says otherwise, I like it.
Point on that point.
Sure.
Yeah, but you're saying right. Let's be fair. You're saying right. Mediocre dubs, you're probably gonna get that. But what's better, a mediocre dub or hearing someone that has literally trained 4 years in an academy that's so epic to listen to?
No problem. I take the point, and I'm going to get on to that general thought in a moment. But yes, poor quality dubs just really don't exist anymore. There is a slight problem that Ross nearly touched upon, which was that yes, it is. It's much harder to have all the staff notes and
Yeah.
go all the way through making a dub as opposed to just subtyping. Yes, that is a legislative problem in which Funimation basically has a monopoly. But that's also not terrible because Funimation have been making pretty good dubs for the last number of years, and they've even started making several dubs, which is a fantastic innovation that we have been waiting for years. No thanks. So just going on to then the point that you were saying there about the fantastic dub, I think that's a very disingenuous argument, personally, because if you're listening to someone speaking Japanese and you're reading subtitles, first of all, you've got the disconnect there because Japanese sentence structure is different to English sentence structure. The placement of nouns and verbs and all that could be entirely different. You could, I believe, the end of one not might go at the end of sentences, whereas for us, it's at the beginning. So, the trying to read it and understand what's going on, but also follow the fact that the intonation is landing at different points in their speech to when you're reading it is one thing. There's also the fact that we don't have the same kind of intonation and whatnot that Japanese people would have. No, thank you. So, on the point about jokes just they're just not going to work subbed or dubbed, and they work better in dub because yes, they will be revamped, they will be reworked to make them funny in English. Furthermore, reading a joke completely, mostly ruins it, let's say, because a key part of any joke is the delivery, and you completely miss out on the delivery with the Japanese. No, fine, go, fine.
Right. So we have to talk about delivery in this fact.
Yes.
We must recognise the irreparable compromising of the artistic integrity. Not all recognition of a piece is conscious. There's a great deal of subconscious read that has been put towards you in matters of inflection, in the way that the actors are speaking, and that undoubtedly affects.
Point taken. Right. I'm going to move on to that as well, and if I don't cover it, then ask the question again, I'll try and answer. So, this is something that Russell has said twice, artistic integrity. Artistic integrity is a nonsense, an utter nonsense, and I will tell you why. Quite simply, literally, all animes are made by committee. They're literally made by committee. There are so many people involved, it is impossible to have a single cohesive artistic vision. Furthermore, things, whenever you look, let's take another example away from anime. Let's go with Star Wars. Let's look at the prequels. Let's look at the fact that George Lucas had complete reign over that, and look at the best they were. There is no vision to be found in there. Go ahead.
Don't contradict yourself there. You first talk about that a large committee can't have artistic integrity while pointing out the flaws of an individual.
There is no, I'm saying there is no artistic integrity at all.
That's an absurdist point.
Well, okay, let me rephrase that then. There is no artistic integrity to a large group of people. There can be artistic integrity to an individual, which is going to be my final point in a moment.
Right, I'll just allow you to
okay.
sit because the people know.
What am I on here, Mr. President? Time-wise?
Yeah, you're probably running low.
Okay, that's fine. So, yes, like I said, artistic integrity, I personally believe, at least in the terms of anime, just doesn't make sense because as we all know, we all see in the credits where it says the Black Committee, usually it's the name of the series, actually. There's so many people involved. There's the writers, there's the staff, there's the people funding it, there's voice actors, yes, people mixing the sound and all that. They just, you might be able to make an argument for it all blends together into one unified license, but I disagree with that. My final point is that dubs, the wording of this motion is interesting. I personally believe it doesn't mean that we have to argue that dubs are better, just that they're not worse. Subtitles are fine. They're not worse than dubs, they're not better than dubs. Really, if you really want the pure, unfiltered, artistic vision of a creator, and even in this case it can be filtered and whatnot, what you need to do is you need to cast aside your blinders with some dubs and instead you need to look to the superior form of media, that being manga! Yes! Go for manga! Now in some cases, of course, as such most famously with Death Note, artistic integrity and license can get thrown out the window when the editors get involved. Nevertheless, it is still the best way to consume your media. Thank you very much, and book dubs!
So, that's all the speeches concluded. I'm now going to open this up to some questions from the floor. Please have some because we've had this room for like ages. So, we're going to first go if anyone has any questions for the sub side at all. Yes, you sir.
Terrible sus. I have watched things that have absolutely gone off the steps.
Can we just have your name for the minute? Sorry. Thank you.
But what's more common, awful subs or awful dubs? And let's be honest, what's more common is an awful dub. Because typically the subs, like, sometimes they're god awful, like they become memes, but that's far less common but that's honestly just far less common than a bad dub. So you're good. So if you're working in probability, subs are probably going to be better than a dub.
Congratulations, Miss Well, you entirely missed the point. He was asking about probabilities, he was asking to address the question of what about poor subs, how do we answer those? They do exist, yes. Unfortunately, I'm slightly hamstrung in that I don't really watch many subs, so I don't really know what they are, so you can't give examples of talk about them. What I would say, though, is that, once again, you asked at the very beginning, what's more common, an awful dub or an awful sub? My answer would be, in this day and age, they're both. Okay. Yeah, they're both equally common, because my point is that there aren't really any awful dubs anymore. There are mediocre, sure, but awful dubs just don't really happen anymore. But yes, I thank you for your point. It was very well. An awful sub definitely exists, even though I can't name any right now.
And now we're going to go for questions for the dub side, if there are any.
The stigma about terrible dubs, do you think that's just something that's been carried for such a long time throughout like the American movies that, oh, it's the dubs who it's bad? Do you think that's just an opinion?
Yes, I entirely believe that is the case. I think that the entire idea of dubs has been poisoned by the curse that is 4Kids Entertainment, who I will curse until the day I die.
He loves Yu-Gi-Oh! And anyone from sub to respond?
The reason that dubs have been cursed, and indeed taken by this trend of loathing amongst the anime community, is a direct result of the fact that you are much more likely to end up with a terrible one. The reputation does not exist without cause. The entire reason it exists is because it is much more expensive, much more work to create a dub, and therefore you are going to, on average, end up with worse production of it. And there is a possibility for a bad sub to exist. I mean, there's definitely a possibility for translating to just not be great. But on average, we are going to end up with better subs than dubs, and dubs deserve their bad reputation and should be experienced.
And now if there's any abstaining questions, this will be if anyone has a point which is not directed to either side specifically, is more general as a whole. It's, yes, that's it.
My name is Ginger. Just on the note of we don't really use this anymore. 90% of everything produced is garbage. I think there will be the more terrible examples of there will be and the more good examples of it there will be. From Asian studies, and we'll discuss what constitutes anime. Anime is just animation. So everything anime that's animated. So if you take for example an English cartoon, and is it more pure? It's translated or like for audio, or it's just unfinished. Like do you think the artistic integrity and purity of language matters in that case? Like translate American cartoons into Japanese. That matters. What do you think about that?
Subs respond first, if anything to say.
First of all, thank you for using my favourite line about anything ever, which is 90% of everything's trash. And I find every opportunity I can use that line, and I am pleased to hear that other people know it. Outside of that, artistic integrity does it, transcend? Does it just relate to this issue? I believe was the essence of the question. Yes.
Well, I mean, was language integrity.
Yeah, language integrity in this matter. And my answer, of course, being an English student, would be yes. I think that in all instances we are going to want to preserve the original integrity of the piece in that manner. And therefore, we should be making the effort, as someone coming from outside the media that is being portrayed, to understand it. We should be trying to learn from the media rather than the media sort of being modified, and I hate using the term dumbed down, effectively to make it more palatable to us. When something is coming from outside our persona, when it belongs to someone else functionally, we should have to go the extra step as opposed to using something in translation.
90% of everything is trash, as you said. I don't know if I would particularly that. I think it's very interesting, the reaction that side had. I think it, in fact, portrays the answer to the previous question. You'll notice that throughout this bit, Mr. Sullivan and I have been noting how you can see that self-start, they're fine. But these who are always willing to shut us down to the judgment table, and yet, what they don't seem to realize is that if 90% of everything is trash, that includes the subs! All they want to do is yell at us about how great they are, how terrible they are. They don't have a rational argument, they don't have a right one. They're just stuck in their ways and want to feel good about their choices. It's much like the PS4 Xbox Wars. It's just, there is no sense to it anymore. They just want to stand there and yell at us. Now, at least they're honest about it. But, I mean, the truth is nothing really to say, nothing of any great substance. So, with regard to so clearly you need to vote against them. Again, this whole thing about we should have to go extra mile. I disagree. We're not obligated to do anything. I mean, why? It really gets to a whole philosophical thing there. Some people write books because they like to write. Yes, but some people also write books because you can make money from writing books and they like to make money. Some people do things because they like to do it. Some people do things because they want to make money from it. What do we owe people who are simply out to sell us things? Nothing at all. And do we know what the people who are making anime or writing manga are to do? Are they to create a majestic work that will carry on their name long after they've died? Or are they just trying to make money and live a comfortable lifestyle? I don't know, and as such, I'm not particularly willing to give in to the fact we may or may not be obligated to do things. Fun fact, the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is, as you can probably imagine, unbelievably rich. And so really, like, who knows anymore? He has to give his permission for all these new spin-off series to be licensed every time they are. GX, 5Ds, etc., etc. And they are trash. I don't deny that. I think everybody can probably get behind that fairly easily.
Including GX, and that's...
I'm, of course, playing GX and that. GX is worse than 5Ds from what I've heard. 5Ds is competent. But anyway, my point is that should we really care about going the extra mile to really get the tutorial of Tsukuyoshi whenever it seems quite clear that he doesn't really care much about world building and building something. He's a store. He just wants to keep melting into cards for money for as long as he can. So yes, I really don't buy that what they're on him on. What was the final thing you read there? Did I address it at all? Let's assume yes. It's done.
Right, well, that's Kelvin's speech there. And now we'll go back if there are any questions for the sub-site again, wrapping right back around anyone has. Yes, you at the back there, sorry.
In your thing, artistic integrity, what is the creative question? Surely any sub-dominated already will learn my artistic integrity than mine was. And then also, what do you say about as increasingly, especially when things like budget companies, a lot of them get their scripts, their casting, anything like that pre-approved by the Japanese people who work on the sub-anime. Things like the Hiroaki casting and stuff were approved by the original creative, I'm not sure if it was the manga artist or the people who work on stuff, the people who work on the anime and stuff. But yeah, in terms of that, surely artistic integrity is kind of being maintained through that, or is it already what they're doing, and so it's all the people interpreting it.
Well, yes, I personally love, like, the dubs I basically claim that I am very, no dubs at all. But I recognize that dubs can be done very well. Examples Cowboy Bebop and all that lark. But what I'm saying is that it's more common. That's what I'm saying. And also what ends up happening with dubs, especially in the is the point I wanted to raise earlier during the speech, is the fact that Funimation usually uses roughly the same voice actors which pretty much means that if you're watching Funimation dubs, what tends to happen is you start hearing the same person pop up again for every single character, and it starts to get really grating after a while. Also, yes, it's a water. Any translation is going to be just awkward. Some translation is just going to be awkward. You can't get around that. But with subs, what you do have is the fact that you have text space. So as I said, if something is very short in Japanese, you can basically stretch it out to at least explain it to its fullest intent. Whereas with a dub, what you have to do is you have to basically find an English phrase that suits it, which is going to be a bit difficult if a phrase just naturally doesn't exist in English. So sometimes what they have to do is they kind of have to completely change the dialogue in order for it to actually work. So in my opinion, it's diluted down a bit more with dubs. But that's my opinion. Anyway, if you watch dubs, fair play to you. But like personally, I like subs more, and I do think there is a culture in the anime community that needs to be avoided in general of dubs are terrible and anyone who likes them shall burn in hell. I am not that person, but yeah, basically I personally just think subs are better in my opinion, but thank you very much.
I'm just going to ask that from here on in that we keep our responses such a brief. I feel there's still a good few people who have questions to ask, and I'm just conscious of how much time we have. But please, go ahead.
Unlike the subtle and nuanced arguments of the sub-site here, I do hate subs. I hate subs, and anyone who watches them will burn in hell. That's it. Yeah, no, I do take the point that anything is... We are always going to lose some meaning translation, but I think that the beautiful thing about dubs is that while changes do end up having to be made, I think dubs allow the liberty required to make changes to make it more understandable to a Western audience so that we understand it better and thereby gain a more similar experience than the original Japanese audience. I feel that if you're watching a dub, assuming it's a good dub, then you're experiencing closer to the experience of watching it as a Japanese person who's Japanese was watching the original thing. Because in a dub, as I've said before, you have all of this tone and inflection idioms, which, because we're not Japanese speakers, we won't get if we're listening to a Japanese person speaking it. And we're not going to get it for subtitles either, because you can't translate idioms. You can't translate them well, because they're cultural, not linguistic.
Okay. Now, if anyone has any more questions, we'll go back to this happy chappy. So if you have any question for the guy who probably said fair for you if you need to burn in hell, go ahead.
I won't apologise.
No? Yes?
Do you think a bad dub ruins your enjoyment of the show more than bad sub does?
Yes. No, I'm not going to lie. Bad dubs are really bad. Last week, I decided I was going to watch an anime called Hajime no Ippo, and gotta say, I thought, alright, I'm going to watch the dub of this. It'll be good. The dub was terrible. I got through halfway through the first episode and thought, I really don't want to watch this. I'll make it through this episode. Then I watched the sub, and the sub's actually a really good show. But I don't think that's relevant nowadays. As I said, we live in a golden age of good dubs. And, you know, while we get some mediocre dubs, there are no bad dubs anymore, I don't think. I don't think we live in a world where bad dubs will ever need to be a thing. I do think that if you've got a bad sub, it won't equally as bad as bad dub, because you still get this ridiculous stilted dialogue where, you know, while a Japanese person might say 2 syllables, the translate will translate it as some ridiculous thing like, you know, I went to the store and I bought an apple and it was good, which is the sort of thing that no human would actually ever say. Can you clarify your point?
You can clarify your point, yeah.
Hello everybody, just to let you know the cosplay talent show is about to begin at Elmswood Hall. So if you want to make your way over there and see some amazing dances, skits of all shapes and forms, you can go there now. That's the cosplay talent show is taking place now at Elmswood Hall, just across the road.
No, you guys are all staged here.
I want to get.
He said we're more enthusiastic about than into this.
What I wanted to add is that there's no bad subs either, so the worst of the worst dubs being made, so the media of dubs being made now ruining your enjoyment of the shows more than the media of the subs being made.
Yeah, I also agree. We also live in a golden era of there's no really bad subs anymore. I think we all live in a world where translation's getting pretty good. And because anime has become a almost respected art form in the West, I think that we don't really have this problem of bad subs and bad dubs. And I think that we can now tackle them each based on their actual merits rather than the circumstantial. I don't actually know how to say this, but
if we had subtitles.
Yeah, if there were subtitles, in a sense, yeah. No, essentially what I'm saying is that we should take the idea of subs versus dubs based on the merits of subs versus dubs. And I don't think the idea of there are more bad dubs is now still a detriment to dubs, because there aren't bad dubs anymore.
I would like. I completely agree with the audience member raised, and I believe stand for itself in many respects. I think the idea that, you know, because there's a lot of things that it doesn't stand up entirely. I think the argument on both it doesn't go on, it falls apart. So I'm just going to take the opportunity to tackle a few of the factual inaccuracies which you presented before the house tonight, which are not surprising. It's 1 o'clock. I'm too used to doing these debates lately. Which I cannot allow to stand, and indeed to show to me that you are a computer science student as opposed to a noble language-based.
Oh, dare software.
But you mentioned this idea that, you know, because what is being said is in a different language, you cannot possibly understand any of the inflections of the idioms. That is wrong. It's utterly wrong, because first of all, as Ms. Swell pointed out, idioms can be translated for and can be explained, but additionally, a manner of presentation and acting is not just about what you consciously recognize in the words. It's not just what you consciously recognize in what's being said. It is all about the timing. It is all about how things are said. It is all about the spacing. It is all about everything that is registered subconsciously as opposed to what's being registered consciously in the word itself. Even though something is in Japanese and you may not understand it, the way the actor is delivering it is still having an effect upon your enjoyment of the piece. You are still gaining something from that, and you are still benefiting.
That's beautiful. No, I'll ask Ryan. I think we may be wrapping up, unless there's any more questions for Alsafer. Yes.
I think it was in the subside you were talking about, like, Garrett said about how voices say information sound insane, and they reuse the voice actors.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed watching subs, while the talent of the Japanese voice actors is so good, I find the characters are very generic. Like, there's like certain categories of characters, like the psychotic ones, yeah, kind of biological, most fun. Do you think that the dog kind of does something similar, or do you think that, you know, would you say dog? It's not really a question, more so an opinion of how stated. I think that the dog has the advantage is that they kind of make their character more distinct. Like the way a dog interprets their character, the way the sub is, I think that's where dog has the advantage.
Yeah.
I think for an enjoyment of the character's interpretation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. What I'd say with with that in general, pretty much tropes will exist wherever you have a dub or sub, like the tsundere, the yandere, all that kind of work. Because like even with dubs, those characters, they do have to be portrayed. You know, they can't just completely change the character. And you know, so you know, Baka will be still translated as idiot or something along those lines in a dub. Also with the nuance, like I can kind of agree that dubs can take more artistic liberty with like maybe adding more to their characters. Like I remember there was a brilliant example of a dub where the dubbers just decided to take an anime that wasn't good and turned it basically into a hilarious anime that was basically just a huge meme. But that's because they recognized that they couldn't really make anything mad out. They couldn't really do much with it. So they just kind of turned it into something mad and became very famous as a result. But with translation, you can still get that nuance because basically with dubs, sometimes with dubs, what's the challenge of dubs is that how do you get certain character relations that make sense in the Japanese language into a dub. Like the honorific system, we don't have that system in English. So, you know, Sam, whatever. So there have been some times where I've watched a dub and they decide to remove those honorifics. And now what that means is that some character interactions don't make sense. Like for example, if a character says kun to someone and that person is a bit abrasive about it, that's very, very hard to portray in English, whereas at least with the sub and you can hear the language, you get to kind of understand the honorifics. So you can understand more about interaction, but I do agree in some aspects that dubs have more artistic liberty as well.
Please restate the question.
Sorry, I was going to say this, like, you know, I went to the subset with the Funimation, like, voice actor characters, kind of say that, voice actors are different characters. But what I was saying was, it doesn't, like, kind of say, so do the same thing, even though the voice actors are actually really different. Like, all the characters have the same type of voice. They're not unique. You do get some exceptions, yes, where the voice is really unique and stuff. I find watching sometimes they all sound the same. I can't differentiate characters.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, actually. Yeah, I think that this also, I think, again, ties into my idea of because we aren't Japanese, it is more difficult for us to differentiate between small, subtle things that a Japanese voice actor does.
Attention, Kikon attendees. Tickets are available at the front of the building. Also, Conference tickets will also be further available at 5 p.m.
Thank you. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. So, see, that's essentially part of my argument. It's that it is more difficult for them to convey these emotions and feelings to us because it is harder for them to relate to us because there are lots of subtle things that we simply will not get, even in a sub. I'm also going to take this opportunity to talk about that thing you said. You didn't reveal the thing in question, and I want to respond to that. What was it?
You have 10 seconds.
8, 7, 6, 5. See, the thing is, I had a really good point to counter it, but I literally cannot remember what you said.
It's not that good then, is it?
Yeah.
It was very good.
At any rate, if anyone has any questions for any side now, or else we'll go to a vote. Anyone at all?
More questions?
Nope. Alright.
What about you? You had a question?
Yeah, but it was terrible.
Right, well then we'll get to the good bit, which is, we are first going to go to, because we're meant to do this at the start, but I forgot, is our prior opinion. So what this will be is before you walked into the room today, what your opinion on this topic was. So if before you walked in here today, before you heard any speeches, your opinion was that you prefer subtitles, please raise your hand and say subs.
Subs.
And if you are of the opposite opinion, please raise your hands and say dubs.
Dubs.
Right. And if anyone has absolutely no preference or opinion on the issue at all, please raise your hands and say, That's true. Read that back to me, brother.
For vote of prior opinion, subs got 5, dubs got 7, and meh got 2.
Good mesmerising. So, what we're next going to go to is our binding vote, which is our vote on speaker ability. This is going to be about what you heard in here today, not on which you agree with more, just who you thought gave the better speeches. So if you believe that these two spoke better over here, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. And if you believe that Matthew and Calvin, God rest his soul, spoke better today, please raise your hands and say nay.
Nay. Go with consulting gems.
And so, if you have no opinion on the speeches whatsoever and you thought they were both great or they were both rubbish, then raise your hand and say bleh. Bleh. 3. And tell me, Mr. Secretary, what is the binding vote? What is it?
The binding vote of today's debate. Subs got 6, dubs got 7. Meh got 3. Meaning dubs have won.
Dubs have won. Right, so and that was the debate. I hope you all found it at least somewhat informative. You, at the very least, found out a wee bit about the French dub of Tangle.
And the school days.
And the school.
It is actually an anime.
I don't know what school days is.
I went to school.
We all went to school, and now we're here.
We didn't all watch School Days.
What?
We didn't all watch School Days.
Yeah.
It's traumatizing.
Yeah, I
thought
have
it was
I have
a
watched it,
anime
yeah.
when I was 12, and I watched the first 4 episodes. It's so normal. You know, high school slice of life. The last episode, murder, decapitation. It's horrible. Don't watch it.
Yeah,
it was
basically it's famous because it's like it was an inversion of the genre. That's pretty much why it's famous. Like,
Thank you everyone who attended for making our second QCon debate a success. For you are the true stars of this anime we call our lives. Debate working in
Well, I didn't set anything on fire, so this recording went perfect.